The AFL Grand Final is finally upon us after what was a hectic season with, everything going on. I don't think we need to delve too much into it. We all know at this point, we've all been hit well over the head with it, especially our viewers in the States. I mean, we've gone through what, people sneaking girlfriends into hotels. We've gone through people getting in fights at strip clubs and getting suspended and all that fun stuff. But none of that matters. None of that really kind of crazy regular season matters because we made it to the grand final, which is the only game that matters at the end of the day. I mean, we had our show. Thank you, everyone, so much for your support with that when we previewed the finals and then ultimately the grand final. A lot of you guys really showed support for that, so I do thank you. But hey, fellas, Coach Donnie Hess, our AFL correspondent, of course, the man, the myth, the legend, the guy with the fro and the kind of graying beard, maybe a little touch of gray just for men right there might do some good. But of course, a media man, the man behind everything of the USAFL. He's here with us. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show.
Good to see you both, gentlemen. Have to say that this finals has been quite a roller coaster. The first round was absolutely insanely good. Second round, not so much. And then these last two preliminary finals, even though one was kind of a stinker, there's still some really good footy. So I enjoyed this final series and can't wait to talk some grand final preview.
Ross, you talked about how we talked about how unique this finals format was, and we talked and I did, with a little bit of history, which was cool.
Very
But
cool.
and we talked before we started the last show about the difficulty in picking this, picking the rounds because of the double chance. Well, I'd like to note, and I think Donnie was in the boat with me as well. We went 0 for 4 with our picks in the first round, and yet managed to pick the correct teams that are playing off in the grand final.
Okay, hold up. You two went 0 for 4. My Brisbane pick was 1 for 3. That made me 1 for 3 in the opening round. So I beat the experts. Damn. If anything, if you might not see us on, maybe you can hear on the audio, but I am just patting myself on my back for that one.
Congratulations.
He takes the little wins so well, Brian. The only bad part is that you and I went almost perfect the rest of the tournament.
That's true.
No.
I was going to say, Ross, congratulations on winning the NFC East.
Oh, thank you so much for that participation trophy.
The little wins, guys. The little wins.
Yes.
All right. But let's because of course we need to talk about how we got to this grand finals between Richmond and Geelong. So of course that crazy kind of qualifying round, we have Port Adelaide beating Geelong in a pretty good game. Brisbane over Richmond. St Kilda surprising everyone with that hectic game right there. 67-64. That was phenomenal. I mean, if it wasn't for the Bulldogs kicking so many damn behinds, they might have actually won that game by a margin.
You kick too many behind, you get your behind kicked.
Pretty much. It's the one biggest thing that you'll notice, and I said it in the preview a little bit too, is goal kicking accuracy can cost you a game in the finals. So as you kind of see in this one, the inaccurate kicking leads to not so much of a victory.
See, and then that West Coast Collingwood game. I will just tell you guys right now, this was the game that I woke up like at 3 o'clock in the morning for. Of course, I'm going to be waking up at nice 2 a.m. Mountain Time for this grand final. I am so ready for that. I might be able to take a little nap before later. But
the grand final nap is the best tradition of this whole thing. It's just that you're going to need to take it a little bit later.
Right. But West Coast and Collingwood at West Coast, I will say that this was the best Australian football game I have ever watched. And it also might be one of my favorite sporting games that I have ever watched. From Coxzilla putting on a show in the first to that, I've never seen it before too, to that light show that West Coast does before the start of the fourth. That got the blood pumping, I will say that much.
For those who aren't familiar, that's a brand new stadium. That's only been open, I think this is the second or third season that Optus Stadium has been open. And everybody who has been talking about it has said how impressive it is, how impressive of a background it is. And, there's a lot of politics in this, but it is a shame really that, especially in a year where they decided that they were going to do a night grand final, that they aren't playing the game at that stadium, because I think it does. I mean, it only sits 50,000 plus as opposed to the 100,000 of the G. But I think that it would have been a wonderful venue, especially since the game is under lights. It also would have meant we could sleep in for another 2 hours, but
that's besides the point. Well, we're in the States, we don't matter as much, right? I mean, I don't know, but that game was just so damn close all the way through. What did you guys think about the first round?
Oh man, I remember tweeting. I remember tweeting, and it got a lot of traction. I had a few expletives. I was like, "Holy!" insert word here, because this was one of the most insane first rounds I've ever seen. Every single game was close. Every single game was competitive. Every single game had tons of highlights. And then you top it off with a game that literally nobody had Collingwood winning that game. Every expert that you listen to, everybody said this is the absolutely unwinnable game. Adam Simpson and the West Coast fans come out there saying that they have to play the dirty Collingwood and that there's no way they're going to lose, because then they're going to have to do 2 more weeks of quarantine. So it was literally this massive buildup for a game that was incredibly good. Flying Ryan taking these massive marks. Coxzilla, again, I'm still trying to figure out where that name came from, has an impressive first quarter. Sadly, the bad part is he kind of disappears the rest of the game. That's the only kind of part that kind of nipped me when watching this one. But the incredible tightness shows you this year how close 1 through 8 was. It was insane how good this first round was.
I think the fact that we did that, Donnie and I missed all 4, I think did kind of show you. I mean, we had come in thinking, I had never had seen a season where there was no confidence in the top 2 teams, and they completely proved us wrong. Geelong came out flat and Port Adelaide didn't in front of their home fans. And then, you got Brisbane at home against Richmond, and everyone was expecting Richmond to completely run over them. But they are a team that does come back, out of adversity, and we'll talk about that. But then you've got the 2 games where, again, I had thought Collingwood was lucky to have finished in the 8, and that the Eagles were essentially a top 4 team that had gotten unlucky and finished 5th. And Collingwood went in to Optus and beat them. And listen, say what you want about Cox disappearing after the first quarter, but he doesn't kick those 3 goals in the first. This is a completely different ball game. And even Nathan Buckley, the coach, said it, that they it really kind of set the Eagles back on their heels. It was a big deal. Now, and the other game, the St. Kilda Bulldogs game, was exactly the way we thought it was going to be. It was a toss-up. I think, the St. Kilda, and the Bulldogs, I mean, they're fight back in the fourth quarter. They were down 4 goals in that third quarter, and they came back. St. Kilda really kind of proved their worth. They're a good team. I feel like, with another piece here or there, they might, they'll go farther next year. But the fact that they were able to get by, and again, it was exactly the type of close game. We knew it was going to be decided by less than a goal, and it lived up to its expectations. So yeah, the first round was really entertaining, and unfortunately, it kind of led into a second week that really wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, bring us into it. The semifinal, we had the matches between Richmond and St. Kilda, and then the Geelong Cats and the Collingwood Magpies. And jokingly, I did say that, hey, Collingwood's going to win it all. And after that very impressive win over West Coast, I was like, hey, maybe they actually have a chance against the Cats. And then they go out and lose 100-32.
Which sounds like a lot, but it would have been even worse in a full 80-minute game. Go ahead, Donnie.
Yeah, no, the biggest thing that I can say is, and it's kind of the equivalent with both of them, is that I think Collingwood and St. Kilda used so much to win their first game that I just don't know if they had the reserves. Like with St. Kilda, here's the part where I felt really, really bad for St. Kilda. Going up against a Richmond team that was angry. They should not have lost that game against Port. They just didn't play well enough to win the game. They lose their ruckman, Bell Chambers. They lose Carlisle because he goes home for the birth of his child, and then one of their players, Steele, gets suspended. So 3 of their top 22 guys are gone for that game against Richmond, and you need your best playing their best to beat Richmond at their best. So really, I felt really bad for a lot of St. Kilda fans because they gave so much to beat the Doggies and they just had nothing in that game. And then it was kind of the same thing with Collingwood. You had the trip back from the West Coast. They had to go back into the hubs and all of this. It was like, really, I felt kind of bad for these prelim games because it was literally, you had 2 very angry teams that both should have played a little bit better in their finals, and they literally took it out on 2 teams that got lucky to win the games that they did, and it showed. And it kind of did show you the difference between the bottom 4 and the top 4 when you see Geelong run through Collingwood, and then Richmond run over St. Kilda like nothing. So it was really kind of, yes, it was anticlimactic compared to the first week because everything was so tight, but that was because the matchups were so close. Neither of these matchups were close, and that was the sad part about this round.
I mean, the thing is, I mean, sorry, before you go, Brian, the thing is with both these matchups is that, I mean, realistically, and going off of the probability, these shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Well, I don't know if I guess you can kind of say that, but we had talked about the fact that the winner of the St. Kilda Bulldogs game, that their prize was going to be annihilation of one of these teams, and that happened. And frankly, I think given the fact that Collingwood had won, Donnie's right. Having had the fly cross country, it was always going to be difficult for them to win, and frankly, their result, and everybody is bagging on Cox's numbers. I mean, he didn't have anywhere the type of game, but to be fair, he was probably one of the few Collingwood players who really was running his heart. They looked completely lethargic out there, and secondly, I mean, they didn't really give him that much to go after. So I don't think everyone on Twitter was really excited about getting on him because he had such a bad game, and he has this swagger that he has, where he's shushing the crowd and does all that. Nobody likes it because they see it as cockiness. But to be fair, I mean, the numbers don't support it, but he had probably one of the best games of anybody. And again, that's kind of a tallest midget situation, just because everybody had such a terrible game. But I think you're right in the sense that we didn't know, nobody expected Collingwood to go, and they knew it was always going to be a challenge against Geelong and Richmond. The 2 years that they've won the premiership, in 2017 and 2019 in this run, they've won. They haven't had to play that extra game, so they were pissed, and they took it out on St. Kilda.
Yeah, and the other thing too, and it kind of goes on. Move on to the next one is, for me, in some situations, I think it was better that Geelong lost that first game because I think they made them play better footy, because there has been that knock on Geelong and Coach Scott is that they do not handle buys well.
And you're spot on with that point too.
And the crazy part about it is that going into this next round, so now Geelong wins, they move into the preliminary finals. Geelong had lost their last 3 or 4 preliminary finals in a row because each and every time they had gotten there, they had won and had not played in the semifinals. They had went straight to the prelims. So in some situations, like honestly, after Geelong lost, I know this is an old team, but this might actually be better for them because they get the continuity of playing one extra game. They don't have that bye week in between. So in some situation, I thought it was actually somewhat of a good move to lose the game. I know they didn't try to, but
yeah. And there's this argument because they put in the rule a few years ago, and I think we talked about this, where they added the bye in between the last round of the season and the first week of the finals. But what happened, I mean, they do that because there's this worry that teams that have already clinched spots are not going to play their full teams. They're going to rest players, kind of like week 17 of the NFL, where they're going to rest players. And there was a whole kerfuffle over that, so they ended up changing. I think it was Fremantle they got that did that. It would have been like 2013 or 2014. So they added this bye week. Well, the problem is that now that creates a situation where if a team wins their qualifying final, there's going to be a period of 4 weeks where they only have played one game. So I think that does kind of play into it. And we saw it not long after that happened. I think, again, 2014 or 2015 was the first year they did it. 2016, the Bulldogs win out of the 7-hole. So it does kind of open things up a bit. But yeah, I think losing in the first round, I think, may have been a benefit to them because they ended up playing 2 stellar games after that.
Yes. And then I just need to ask you guys, as a professional opinion. So as I admittedly am still fairly fresh to this sport, and so like I'm not entrenched in the community, and I don't know like all the shared opinions as I do like in my NFL stuff, MLB stuff, you know? So I was watching this Richmond St. Kilda game, and I have grown the opinion of that I really do not like Tom Lynch, and I really do not like the Richmond Tigers. Is that something that is shared with others, or am I alone here, or what was that kind of?
I think Lynchy's hate is, or the dislike towards Lynch is justified because
Okay.
he does come off as that type of player, and
He's
he
a bit
has done
prick.
that sort of thing. Yeah. I don't know if he's more hated than Toby Green at this point. Karate kick Toby Green.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of the Tigers, it also, I think, they do have a little bit of a snarl about them, and I think it's the way that they have suddenly come on. I mean, the Tigers hadn't won. They hadn't been in, when they made it in 2017. They hadn't been to a final in 35 years, and they hadn't won a grand final in 35 years, and they hadn't been to the wooden premiership in 37 years. It was 1980 and 1982. So now all of a sudden they're there, and their fans who are, they are the largest membership group of everybody. They have over 100,000 members, which is by far the best in the AFL. They're probably one of the most loyal teams there. And yeah, I think now there is a little bit of that New England Patriots syndrome kind of going where they're a nouveau riche in terms of their success. And so they do have a little bit of a target on their back. So yeah, I think there is that little bit there. Are they as hated as Collingwood? I think Collingwood's the annoyance there is a little bit more deep rooted, but
I will accept the explanation. And then if we want to take, yeah,
can I hop in one?
Yes, absolutely.
There's one other thing too, is that, and I kind of agree. I was going to say the same thing as him, is that unfortunately, I think it's kind of a society, especially here in the U.S., is we don't like dynasties. We really don't. As much as a lot of people say they love dynasties, they like seeing teams have great years. I think all of us have known that it's a kind of the same thing as with the Yankees. You love them.
You hate them. You want to say the Patriots. You want to say the Warriors.
No in between.
You want to say the Yankees.
You'd say the Dallas Cowboys.
You want to say the Bruins.
You'd say the Boston Bruins.
Well, there's a
Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, and there's a point in that also, Donnie, and the reason why the Yankees, I think, are so disliked, and why look at the Patriots.
They buy talent.
Well, it's not even so much about it's not even so much that, but the fan base becomes insufferable.
Yes,
and all you got to do is, again, I live in Philadelphia, and there are so many people who are Cowboys fans who became Cowboys fans during the 90s, who lived in Philadelphia and became Cowboys fans. Now, 10, 15 years ago, when they were going 2-14, they completely disappeared off the face of the planet. Now, that isn't the way with Collingwood fans, because they are loyal to a fault. And I think you'll find that with most Aussie Rules football fans. Say what they want. I mean, you look at Melbourne, who for many years has suffered, but even to their games, they'll still 15, 20,000 people, they'll still come out, it looks like nothing in the cavernous MCG, but there is still that loyalty.
Gotcha.
But that's the thing, is that when they do go on a stretch like this, is that they do become, they become kind of insufferable.
It's understandable. It's understandable, but at the same time, I still don't like it.
Well, and then to go off of it too, is that for the longest period of time, kind of like he was saying, is Richmond was not a successful team. As they would get into the finals and they would lose. There almost became a quote in Australian slang, is that if you screwed something up, you were Richmondy. For the longest period of time. Like, I used to hear this on podcasts, like Richmondy because they would find a way to lose a game that they probably shouldn't. So it's like seeing a team go from a team that could always count on to stuff up something, to mess up something. There's
It's
no
to
way
Richmond something.
to Richmond something. And now it's like they
beautiful.
can't lose. It has rubbed some fans the wrong way because it's like all of a sudden now these fans that you could give a little bit of stick to, now they can give it right back to you, and even with a little more gusto. So it's like I think a lot of people have kind of like, it's the dynasty thing. It's in that, in the Australian culture, like I said, is that because of the insufferableness, it's like I respect the Tigers because of what they've brought a team from literally out of the doldrums of the bottom part of the ladder into an absolute monster. And the crazy part about it is they don't have a lot of superstars. Lynch hasn't been there very long. He's only been, this is only his second year with the Tigers. Before Lynch, they won the 2017 final. Reroll was their full forward. Now he's their forward pocket because they signed Big Lynch. So it really has kind of shown how this Tigers team is kind of evolved and changed a little bit. They're not the same team that they were in 2017. They are a little bit different, but they still have that same chaos, just absolutely insane type of footy where it's all pressure all the time, and they're so good at it. And that's sometimes for some people gets annoying, but if you enjoy the purity that the way they play, it's a lot of fun to watch as a neutral.
Well, if we want to keep the Richmond talk going, then let's move on into our preliminary finals. Port Adelaide and the Richmond Tigers, with the Richmond taking this one 46-40, 1-goal game. Your guys' thoughts on this one?
This was an absolute slugfest, which reminded me a lot of their first game in the early part of the year in the same venue. This was back and forth footy. This was champagne footy. This was guys giving everything. I mean, Brad Ebert getting a concussion in the last seconds in the last parts of the game,
which is going to be his final act. Yeah, it's going to be his final act is getting that concussion.
Yep, and he retired right after the game. Yeah.
Okay. So was it the concussion talking with the retirement? No, I mean, he had this plan, which was nice. It kind of sucked to see him have to retire with a concussion on his mind, but nonetheless.
But the thing though is that the effort and the willingness to give up his body for the play is something that you, like I said, you got to give him a little bit of kudos for. Yes. And Ebert's been a great player for a long time, so it's a well-deserved retirement. It kind of stinks that he goes out, like we said, with a concussion, but this was a really good game. But this really kind of showed you the class that Richmond has, because a lot of people had Port winning this game, even though Richmond was the defending champions. Richmond has their mojo back after a nice win over St. Kilda. There were some people kind of doubting them a little bit because St. Kilda was not playing so well. But to see the Richmond game at its finest in the rain, in a sloppy condition, but to still see Port be in this game. I mean, Port could have rolled over there for a bit when Richmond was rolling there for a bit. But the young talent, this is a Port team, I'm going to say this right now, will be in the finals next year unless disaster happens. They've got so many good players, such a good little core there. One of the top 10 picks this year is a Port Adelaide Academy kid. They're going to get him, which only is going to make this team that much stronger. Where Ebert comes out, this young kid comes in. So it's perfect. It's a perfect exchange here. So really, when I take it, Port has a lot of things to look good at. They did not even make the playoffs last year. They were 13th or whatever. Nobody expected them to finish to finish minor premiers and to win the league wire to wire. Nobody expected this. If I'm the Port Adelaide fans, yes, it sucks that you had a chance to play in the grand final, but coming short and playing as well as you did with a very young, very talented team, there is a lot of good things to look at when it comes to being a Port Adelaide fan. So the Port Adelaide fans have a lot to look forward to in the next few years.
That's a very solid point with that. Yeah, I mean, they led. I mean, they were coast to coast number one the whole season for a reason. But to your point, so they just didn't have enough this year. They're if I'm a fan of them, I'm gonna be sad, but at the same time, there's a really bright future to look forward to, which is always a good feeling to fall back on after a finals loss.
Yeah, and Donnie, you mentioned the conditions. I think if this was played under, if it wasn't raining, I don't think the game is as close. The weather tends to equilibrate matches, and Donnie and I have both played in games where the ground has been wet, where it has been raining, and if you're not familiar with a football, and I don't have any in my bedroom in the bedroom down here, I'm sure Donnie will find one quicker than I will.
I probably could, but I got to get up and I don't want to make that much noise.
It's okay. You'll have to take our word for it. You think of a football, and Ross, football has like grips on it. It has dimples. A rugby ball it's a little bit more defined. It's made because it's made out of synthetic rubber. This is made out of leather. It's smooth. When that ball gets wet, it's like a greased watermelon. It really is. And so it's a matter of who can play better ground level football, who's better at picking up with the ball, who's better at being less sloppy with it. And for the first 3 quarters, that both teams really struggled with it, but it was, again, it equalized the match. And I think, like I said, I think that's the only reason that Port was in it. Not to say that they didn't play well, but I think if the weather's better, then Richmond executes things a lot quicker, and this game isn't as close as it is. But as it is, they're still playing determined. I think also the fact that Adelaide were playing in Adelaide helped. Port Adelaide were playing at Adelaide Oval helped, but Richmond showing the class that they normally do, and Dusty getting into his zone. And I mean, I think it would have been very difficult overall for the Power to end up winning. But I'm with Donnie. I think that if they make a run next year, it won't be a surprise, because they do have a young team. And I think even if it's not next year, I think they'll be hanging around the 8 for at least the next couple of years, especially with Ken Hinckley as coach.
And now with the last game of the finals up until the grand final, going over to the Gabba, we had the Brisbane Lions taking on the Geelong Cats. With Geelong taking this one, my biggest takeaways from this is, shocker, we saw Charlie Cameron scoring goals. We saw we saw Dangerfield making some plays. We saw Hawkins making some plays. But going off of kind of what you alluded to earlier in the show, Donnie, is that I feel like this game, and kind of what we talked about in our preview show for this, is that it was more just kind of veterans against rookies, and the kind of whole veteran moves just I think their experience showed in this game.
Definitely. And it's the pure class of Dangerfield and the experience that Geelong has. You definitely could see it shown out as this game went on. And Brisbane is still a young team. Brisbane still has a lot of young talent. Yes, they've got experienced old heads in certain places, but they just don't have the battle-hardened, experienced, finals tested team like Geelong does. I mean, Geelong has several guys that have several premiership flags under their belts. Brisbane doesn't have that. And it was the one thing that I was worried about going into this last game is that maybe Brisbane's hype train about playing at home, playing in a grand final at home, was maybe going to catch up to him. And I think it kind of did in this game. And that's the kind of the sad part about it is I think a lot of people wanted to see Brisbane playing at home in the grand final. It would have been amazing. You'd have had a sellout crowd of all the tickets that you possibly could have had. But Geelong, in their prototypical fashion, they played their style of footy. Brisbane could not get their game going. The only thing that kind of a little bit worries me going into this grand final between Geelong and Richmond is Geelong was woefully inaccurate in front of goal. And when you play Richmond, you cannot have that. You cannot give them the opportunity to score and score often on them. Their pressure goes up. It gets harder and harder to score. And as we saw earlier in the year, Geelong had a ton of trouble with Richmond the first 3 quarters. They started going in the fourth quarter, but you cannot do that in a grand final because the pressure is that much higher. So if I'm a Cats fan, I'm excited to be in the grand final. Danger's in the grand final for the first ever time. Gary Ablett's got a chance to end his career with a grand final win, but I'm a little iffy about this matchup a little bit.
It hurts me when you see 16 behinds to only 11 goals. I mean, the 82 is a nice end product, but that 16 is the difference between a blowout and a loss.
I have it made me think of a couple of things. One, just for the benefit of you and your listeners, I'm going to look up what the record is for most inaccurate kicking in a game is. It's on here, but just to talk about, and it's funny, I hadn't thought about this until Donnie mentioned it. Made me think of the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, the NFC Championship game between the Vikings and the Eagles, where the Vikings had a chance to play in a home Super Bowl, and Nick Foles happened. But I think Donnie again mentioned that Port Adelaide or Brisbane is a lot like Port Adelaide. They've got a lot of young talent. I mean, Lachie Neale, is probably the best pickup that you've seen. The guy goes on and wins the Brownlow, and I really like Hugh McCluggage, who had a pretty good solid game this. But again, Gary Rowan is a champion. Guy kicks 3 goals. Hawkins is always a rise to the occasion. Gary Ablett, he's going to retire. And he even had a really good game too. So again, I think having played on the road and having played in Queensland a lot, as much as the home field advantage, was as much as that was a thing, the fact that they played on the road so much, I think really kind of nullified that. And yeah, it would have been great to see them play at home, just simply because it would have been a true home game. None of this stuff at the MCG and whatnot where everybody plays. I think that even with the veterans as aging as they are, Dangerfield is pretty much at the peak, if not even slightly past his peak. Ablett is still playing like it's 2006. Hawkins is still really good. Brian Myers has done really well. All these guys have done fantastically well, and I think they deserved it. So the most behinds, by the way, ever kicked in a game is a 41 by the Hawthorne Hawks, who kicked 25, 41, 191. That was in 1977 when they defeated St. Kilda by, I think 83 points. The least accurate, there are 2 teams that have not kicked a goal, and they actually had the same score. Geelong kicked no goals 18, and St. Kilda kicked no goals 18. Both of those happened right after World War I. The least accurate in this century actually happened last year when Fremantle kicked 219 against West Coast and lost 122-31. That is the least accurate in this actually since in the AFL era. But anyway.
Awful. Well, man, okay, so you brought us one stat from the 70s, one stats from right after World War I, but I do appreciate you kind of make it a little more current with that. The last 2 in 19. I don't think oh man, those are a little bit ago, but also that does I keep on to remind myself that this sport is from, we talked a little bit, me and you, Brian, with our show, the VFL, in that history, 1897. And the history of the sport is amazing. But was this, I like the finals though so far. If quicker recap of qualifiers, really good. Semifinals, if you like offense, they had that, and then the prelims going to the grand final. Really good footy right there. And then with our finals recap out of the way, let's get on into some other action, more specifically about the upcoming grand final, but maybe not about the upcoming one first, because we have Donnie Hess's top 5 grand finals that he has seen. And so, are we going to do this from 5 to 1? That's how you want to roll?
That'd be perfectly fine with me, because
right.
I think Brian will get a kick out of this. So
bring us in then.
So yeah, I know. So really in 2009 is when I really got back into it, and conveniently the first couple of finals I saw were absolutely awesome. So here's 5 of my favorite grand finals I've actually gotten to see live. Number 5, this is a fun one. 2010, the draw. The last ever draw ever to happen in the grand final, St. Kilda v Collingwood. It's a draw. And the absolute insanity of the party that I was at, the pure dumbfoundedness of going, okay, what's happening now? I mean, it was
they got to play this from the beginning
exactly
again.
We all looked at our Australian Paul and went, Paul, what's going on? Are they going overtime? It's like, nope, they come back next week. We're like, well, that's great. There goes the party.
So that's be the most anticlimactic ending ever.
Well, and the best part is that the camera is just putting on the players, and all the players are laying on the ground. There's no literally there's no reaction at all. All the fans, it's almost dead quiet after the siren goes off because the players are laying on the ground. The fans are just standing there. They're looking around, going, what's going on? So it was absolutely insane. But it really was a really well played game. It was kind of sad that in the replay the next day, Collingwood kind of. Yeah, they rolled right over St. Kilda in a game that it was rather anticlimactic after a great tight game the week before. So
Poor Saints.
moving on, number 4, the 2009 grand final, Geelong v St. Kilda, which ends out by 12 points. It was a really, really good game. This was a St. Kilda team that had only lost 2 games the entire year, but both were to Geelong. So it was quite an interesting going into the grand final. Everybody's like, can Geelong do it a third time? It was the only loss that St. Kilda had the entire year was to Geelong. So this was a really, really good game. In fact, the 12-point margin at the end was actually a little bit misleading because it was a 6-point margin and a guy got a kick after. Yeah. Rook kicks the kick after the siren and had nobody on the mark. So he actually rolled the goal through because nobody touched it. Yep, because nobody touched it.
Everybody was celebrating on the other side of the field. All the St. Kilda players were laying on the ground, despondent, and Max Rook was like, "Shoot, I'm just going to roll this in."
Yep, it was one of the most anticlimactic last goals ever. It was kind of classic, but it was a really good game. Chapman kicks the goal late in the game with a great call in that game, so I absolutely loved it. It was a great kind of reintroduction back into the game as the 2009 grand final. Now to number 3, and a good friend of ours, Brian Frode, will love me for this one. 2016 grand final, Western versus Sydney, 22-point win for the Doggies, ending their long drought with not having a flag. I had to admit, as a Swans fan, this was kind of bittersweet for me because as much as I wanted the Swans to win, the Swans had been a really good team that entire year, had Buddy Franklin now after the move from Hawthorne. Everybody thought this was the Swans team was going to win another flag. And the Doggies ran the table from the 7th spot, going 4 games. Nobody thought they could do it. And to see the joy of the Western suburbs seeing the Dogs win the flag was absolutely awesome. And me, even as a Swans fan, I was like, it was the one time losing a grand final. Actually, I was completely okay with it because I knew the Dogs had won a flag for like 38 years. It was insane, like 63 years.
It was they had last won in 54, but they hadn't even been to a grand final since 1961. And there was really good videos, and some of them surfaced like around the time of the grand final a couple of weeks ago, of when, because the Bulldogs had to beat the Giants in Sydney to make it to the grand final. And I think of the 20,000 or so people that were at Giant Stadium for that final, I think a pretty good slice of them were Bulldogs fans, many of them who had driven the 9-10 hours from Melbourne. And I know that, and just seeing their reactions, not even of them winning the grand final, but just getting to the grand final. And you mentioned about seeing the Western suburbs. My friend John Carr, who is a rabid Tigers fan and who in fact named his young son Richmond, they live in Footscray, and they said that they were happy because the community, even though that they were, born and bred Tigers fans, the fact that they got to be a part of those celebrations in the Western suburbs really meant a lot to them, just because it was, they got to see a lot of their neighbors be happy too.
And then another funny fact, one of the most interesting things is that I because of some of the podcasts that I listen to is, Brian, did you hear about your other favorite Brian's fun little word drop in the Triple M call?
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
So Brian Taylor, who our lovely Brian Barish got to meet when he went to Melbourne in the IC Cup the last time, is one of the better callers. He was calling.
That's debatable. Go ahead.
Oh. Yeah, I know. That's one going up there. But I'm trying to build you up here.
I understand.
Okay. He was calling for Triple M, which is one of the big radio stations at the time. When Boyd kicks a goal from the center square after tackling Buddy Franklin, which most people can't do, it's one of the worst things to do. He kicks a goal. Brian Taylor drops an F-bomb on live radio.
Hell yeah.
Now,
he drops an F-bomb.
Yeah, I was going to say, mind you, if that happened here, he'd be gone immediately. With them, it's not. It's not like illegal. It's frowned upon. You really shouldn't say that.
And that's the way it should be here in the States, damn it.
But they tell you not to do that, but it just gotta laugh. But you can say excrement.
The Aussies are different. That's why.
Yes.
Australia is just different.
Yeah.
In a very respectful, in a positive way. That's different in that sense.
Yeah, if you listen to any of their podcasts, you'll see it all the time. There are 4-letter words that get dropped all the time. But if you can find the audio, it is absolutely
it's really good.
Because the rest of the box is cracking up. Like Luke Darcy, who is a Western Bulldogs, who is telling you does the radio show. Even he's like, he dropped the magic word. He dropped the magic. It's absolute.
That's amazing
Comedy. It's like I said, if you ever want to hear some if it's raining at a game, I love when they say it's pissing down. Rain. Like one time they actually had a guy on the boundary. They asked him, they're like, hey, how's it doing at that? It's absolute pissing down rain down here. And it's just they drop it. It's
that has to be. I mean, the sport itself is amazing, but the commentary is really what sets it apart for me.
I'm telling you, if you go and find Rex Hunt, he is probably the best. I mean, he was giving these guys nicknames, and I think when I was on the show, just me, that one time, I had mentioned that, like, he came up with anybody whose cocks is big cocks, anybody who, Graham Johncock became Stiffy, Brendan Lade became Hugot, I mean, just the audacity, he came on, he used to say that was closer than a bee's diaphragm, although, he came out once and actually said dick, so it is part of that. And, it's, some people don't like it, but, to me, as long as I know what's going on, it's fantastic.
Yeah. It's always fun.
Sometimes it's almost the perfect call. Like I heard one time, like there was the game between Hawthorne and Sydney that I caught the Triple M call where Buddy Franklin kicks a goal. It's like 70, 80 meters. It's a long goal. And you literally hear the Triple M guy, James Brayshaw, literally go, he tells Buddy Franklin, piss off, buddy. You're not supposed to be able to do that. And it's the way it's said is absolutely perfect.
Yeah, can we get those guys here, please? Because we're stuck with Joe Buck over here on Fox.
Here we go.
You know what's funny is, so Donnie mentioned that I met BT. Jim Brayshaw was in the box too. I got to talk to both of them. And the first question when I got interviewed for Triple M from JB was, correct me if I'm wrong, but American commentators tend to be more conservative. And I went, well, I've been listening to you guys for the last 20 years. So, and I didn't, to me, I didn't think of that because, you think of a guy like Joe Buck, or you think of guys, I mean, Donnie and I are hockey fans, and we are, with Mike Emmerich retiring, and they're talking about Kenny Albert replacing him, and Kenny Albert is just, I mean, do I want to fall asleep watching hockey?
Get Gary Thorne.
Get Gary Thorne back. Yeah. But that's another show. But that's the thing, is that we're used to these guys that are just like there's no personality. And I like the fact that, I mean, Brayshaw,
Romo.
Well, I mean, he's a color guy. I'm talking about,
the actual,
yeah. Think of like
a Gus
Johnson.
Are just,
But go on, Donnie. We digress.
No. That's that's one of my favorite program. No. That's one of my favorite memories of that was hearing BT drop the magic bomb. That was absolutely hilarious. Okay, I know exactly. Number 2. 2018 Collingwood v West Coast. Collingwood fans may not like it, but this was the grand final they got to after upsetting the Tigers, and West Coast nips them late by a 5-point margin. Dom Sheed, Collingwood fans, Sheed will be a cuss word in the next 5 years, I swear, because of that goal and the controversy of was there a block, was there not with the Sheed goal, and just the fact that I saw a documentary that said that Sheed and Liam Ryan at one time, Simpson wanted them off the ground not even 2 minutes before McGovern gets the intercept mark, kicks it down the line to Lysette, who then kicks it to Liam Ryan, who should have been off the ground, who then kicks it to Sheed, who should have been off the ground, who kicks the winning goal. So it's kind of the crazy little kind of twists and turns that a game may take. So that one was really, really awesome. And then there's going to be a few people that are going to go, this is a biased number one, but I'm not going to lie. Number one, 2012, Sydney Swans, Hawthorne, 10-point margin in a game that literally, the reason I love it is because it's so flowy. Hawthorne kicks 4 goals. Sydney kicks 5. Hawthorne kicks 3 goals. Sydney kicks 4. The game was back and forth. 99,000 is the biggest ever crowd ever for Sydney to play in front of at the time. This was an absolute cracking game. It was really interesting watching it back now. Know that Buddy Franklin is now on the Swans. He was playing with Hawthorne at the time. So it's really, really interesting. But for me, this was one of the best grand finals, and to hear Dennis Committee call it at the end, giving Sydney the premiership, was absolutely awesome. And then to hear Brian Taylor get kind of smacked off because they interview Mike Pike, who's Canadian. Brian Taylor earlier, like 2 years prior, said that Mike Pike playing in the AFL was a joke. So to hear him kind of give BT a little backhand in the broadcast that I watched, he's like, I don't have to say anything. I'm a premiership player.
And it warms my heart to know, because BT played for Collingwood during the time that was referred to as the Collywobbles, where they had that 32-year stretch where they didn't win a premiership. In fact, I think he got delisted or was left off the team the year that they broke the streak in 1990. And it forever warms my heart to know that Mike Pike has more premiership medals than Brian Taylor. And that Brian Taylor has as many as I do. You talk about those calls. I think the best one was when Nick Malcheski sealed it, and Jim Brayshaw, the Suns have won on a kick by Bearded Melcho, because he had this big F off beard. And so Bearded Melcho.
Malcheski,
Yeah,
that was a good one. And the call that, I can't remember. It's not Dennis Committee. The other guy that called
Bruce McAvaney.
Yeah, Bruce McAvaney.
The culture of those Bloods.
No. It was the call when Goodsey kicks one of the later goals. He's like, the cometh the man, cometh the champion. When he kicks that goal later, because the crazy part is Goods kicks that goal and he had a partial PCL tear.
Damn.
Yeah, he finished the game. That happened in the second quarter, and he
finishes
the game, and he kicks a goal late in the game for it. So, but it's one of the other games that really kind of helped me become a Swans fan. No, I'm not a bandwagon. I didn't just jump on because of 2012. I did have other reasons, but it kind of solidified it. No, because if you watch the game, it really was one of those that I loved the style, because Sydney had over 100 tackles in that grand final.
That's awesome. Know what though? I'm not going to judge you, because so there's one that in that era that, so you started following in 2009, or I got back into it. In 2008, the year before that, Hawthorne played Geelong. Now Geelong were the defending premiers. They had gone through the season with only one loss, and they had breezed through the finals, and they met Hawthorne, who I think we're the second best team at the time, but we're a distant second. They were a good side. They had a young Lance Franklin. They had young players like Chance Bateman, and Rioli and Roughhead as well, who is still very much in the bet. They had a good side, but everybody coming into that thought that Geelong was gonna be a closer game, but Geelong was gonna win by probably 3 or 4 goals at the very least. Now, and this was at the end of my first full playing season with the Philadelphia Hawks, and I hadn't really gotten behind a team. And most of these guys, there's a lot of Australians there, but there's a lot of Americans who really hadn't. So here is our team in a sense, and they're in the grand final. And as the night goes on, and it's a close game, and then in the third quarter, Hawthorne starts to pull ahead, and then they go on and they win in the fourth. And and that kind of galvanized me as a Hawks fan from that point. But that one, and I ended up somehow or another with 24 meat pies that ended up in my freezer. So
that's a win.
Well, and to go off that too is the reason that I specified that grand final the way I did is because if I really wanted to, I could have thrown in two that I did not see live, but I have seen the entire games. The 1989 grand final between Geelong and Hawthorne,
Probably the best of them all.
One of the most famous ones. In fact, if you want to have a fun one, the guy we were talking about, James Brayshaw, they recalled that with James Brayshaw, Brian Taylor, the Duck, Wayne Carey, King Wayne Carey, and then Billy Brownless, the Geelong
who played in the game.
Played in the game. They recalled it for Triple M. That video is on YouTube. It is hilarious. It is awesome because they constantly are giving Billy Brownless, joking because Billy Brownless doesn't exactly have the greatest game in this, and this is one of the best grand finals ever. So it's absolute comedy. If you want to do it, I can link it to you, Ross. It is.
I'm gonna have to link that in this video, I guess.
It is worth the watch. The
Hell
1989 grand final, and then one of the highlight videos that I eventually found the whole game, and I think even the Watch AFL has it now. The 2005 grand final between Sydney and West Coast, where Sydney ends their 72-year drought, which at the time was the longest drought and still is the longest drought, but I think Melbourne's coming close to it. I think
Melbourne's got a little bit of time. They're at
somebody's close to it.
No, Melbourne is the longest drought right now, and I'm doing the math. They're at 56 years right now. 1964 was the longest. That was. Did I listen to that game? I listened to the 2006 final live,
which was the same two teams.
Which is between the same two teams and was just as good. Who would have thought that the sequel was just as good as the original?
Just as good as the original.
Anthony Hudson. And the funny thing about that game is that my wife's birthday was the day after. We had been dating a year at this point, and she was going to school at George Mason, and it was Friday night going into Saturday. And I sat up in her dorm on her laptop because I didn't have a laptop back then. Don't judge. Sat up on her laptop until 3:00 in the morning listening to the game. And the next night we went out to a bar that I later found out as soon as I walked in actually showed the grand final. And I was like, I could have been watching the game with Australians, and I didn't.
Well, 05 Sydney wins by 4. 06 West Coast wins by 1. Two of the closest two grand finals year to year was both the same two teams, West Coast and Sydney, and they each split it.
That's awesome.
It was one of the reasons why the caller said, he said, who would have known the sequel would have been better than the original? Because it was absolutely insane, but it just kind of showed you but those are a couple of games that I've found through searching and different stuff like that. I did not actually see them live, or at least the 09 in most of the grand finals that I had on my list. I actually did see live.
Yep.
The 10 grand final, like I said, we saw it with a group party over at our founder's Tyler Cameron's house, which, like I said, was the awkward moment of, hey Paul, what's happening now? It's a draw. Yeah, we're coming back next week.
Stuff.
Which then we all watched it at home because nobody wanted to do a second part.
Right.
It was the same thing with us too.
Playing at that point. But thank you. The great list with that. And then with that being said, we are going to move kind of more into our analysis of the two teams and then our predictions for this. But first, we had this segment on our preview show for this, but we bring you to again history with Brian Barish.
So about these two teams. Well, first of all, the grand final, just to briefly touch over it. The VFL was formed from 8 teams that broke away from the VFA, Victorian Football Association. And the first year they did not have a grand final because they did a round robin with the top 4 teams. Well, the next year they did, and it's been held every year since 1924, which is when they went back to a round robin and failed. And in the early years, it was played at a numerous different places until 1902, when it was first held at the MCG, and it's been held at the MCG every year since, except the war years, World War II, when the match was played at Prince's Park, which is the home ground for Carlton. Now it's their training ground. And then in 1991, because of the construction that was happening at the MCG, it was held at Waverley Park, which was before Marvel Stadium, or the Docklands, was the AFL's home stadium. And they were the plan was, it was built in the 70s. The plan was to eventually expand that to where it could host 150,000 people. That never came to fruition. But this is the first grand final to be played outside of Melbourne, to be played in outside of Victoria. It's the first night grand final. All the other ones were held in between 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it is the latest grand final. And the latest prior to this was October 20th in 1923. So this is the latest grand final on the calendar. Now, about these two teams, the Geelong Football Club, known as the Cats, they were formed in 1859. They are the second oldest football team in Australia. They are one of the oldest football teams of any code in the world. They were founded, as I said, in 1859. Melbourne was the oldest, founded a year before. And they have just about for their entire history worn white and navy blue. They were a foundation member of the Victorian Football Association when that was founded in 1877. And they managed to win 7 premierships, all within the first 10 years of that league's history. They made the jump along with those 7 other teams to the VFL. And there was a long period of struggle before they finally won their first premiership in 1925. In fact, there was a period from 1901 to 1924 where they had lost 5 consecutive semifinal matches. So they hadn't even won a game at that point. They had a couple of purple patches in the 1960s where they had made the finals in the late 50s and then in the 1960s. They had won 8 premierships, or rather, they had won 6 premierships between 1925 and 1963. And Donnie mentioned the 89 grand final. That was before this bit of dynasty. Some of their biggest. Some of their most successful footy, but they didn't win a championship. They didn't win a grand final. They lost in 89. They lost in 92 to West Coast. And they lost in 95 to West Coast. I believe they lost in 95 to Carlton, I think was who they ended up beating, the Blues. But they had that stretch from 2007 to 2011 where they won 3 in 5 years. They had lost the grand final in 2008. And we mentioned that their nickname was the Cats when they had first begun. They were known as the Pivotonians because Geelong is the only team that is located outside of the Melbourne metropolitan area. It is a city of 250,000 people, and Port Phillip Bay, which is Melbourne, is at the top up here. You can't see this if you're listening to the podcast, but
just imagine it.
Port Phillip Bay is a horseshoe, and Melbourne is on the top. And then if you go around going counterclockwise, going west, Geelong sits on the western shore. So, and then you pivot and go west to continue along the road towards South Australia and the Great Ocean Road. In right around World War I and even after that, they were colloquially known as the Seagulls, but they got the Cats name after a match in 1921 where a black cat came on the field and then they won the game. So they were informally known as the Cats, and then as time went on, they picked up that nickname.
Well, all right.
So that is the story of the Geelong Football Club. Now, the Richmond Tigers were founded in 1885. Richmond is actually right across the street from the Melbourne Cricket Ground. They played their games for many years at Punt Road Oval, which again, you could walk. It's a 5-minute walk from Punt Road Oval over to the MCG. It's where they still practice even today after a redevelopment. The Richmond women's team plays there when they're not, when they're able to hold them. When they're not, they ended up playing in Carlton, which again is right up the street. But they, as I said, they came on board in 1880. They were founded in 1885. They won 2 VFA championships, 1902 and 1905. And then in 1908, they were one of 2 sides were invited to join the VFL. So in a sense, they were one of the league's first expansion teams. They have won a total of 12 titles. And we mentioned they had their most successful run in the late 60s through 1980. They won 5 of their 12 premierships, 67, 69, 73, 74, and 80. But the last grand final they had made before this current run was 1982. They had not made it to a grand final after that point. Of course, they went in 2017 where they beat Adelaide, and then last year when they defeated GWS. Now, their colors are the Tigers, just simply because of their colors, black and yellow. In their early days, they were known as the Hornets, but very early on, I would say right around the turn of the 20th century was when they started to take on the Tigers nickname. And their theme song, Tigerland, which for my money is the best club song in the AFL, is named after a song from a musical, I forget which one, around vaudeville times from 1907 called Row, Row, Row.
Well, there you have it, everyone.
And there you go.
And that is History with Brian Barish. And fade out.
And
okay.
fade.
And with that being said, it is time for pretty much the main event of the show. It's time to get down to brass tacks, the real stick and potatoes of everything. We got a cat against a cat in the grand finals. And the question for you two is which cat reigns supreme? So Donnie, would you like to be the man to lead us off with your grand final kind of prediction with this?
Oh boy. So
but I mean, at least the cool thing is, before I get going, we all three of us did end up predicting in the different method. We all still had Richmond and the cat and Geelong in the grand finals. So I mean, for that, I think we did not bad.
Well, the biggest question is, did any of us flip from what we did in the original preview, or do we all stay the same? That's the biggest question there.
Yeah, right.
This is one of those games where it's a kind of a head versus heart, and kind of the one thing that Brian did with the USAFL's tweeting is the think and the want.
Which of course you can go follow that Twitter account at USAFL 1997.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Thanks, buddy.
Gotcha.
Oh yeah, it's a fun follow. It's a very fun follow. This one's one of those. It's head versus heart. There's so many good stories. There's Dangerfield's first final, Ablett Jr., the least kept secret in all of football, that he's retiring after this game. It's just the way it is. Plain and simply, for me, it's so hard to pick against the Tigers the way they're going. My head sees a very good Richmond team that's playing super well, a fully healthy list. There are no gaps in this team. I want the Cats to win, but my pick will be the Richmond Tigers.
Okay, and then is that your same pick as the preview show?
Yep. That's same pick that I had at the start, which like I said, kind of thought it was funny that it was reversed, but I had the final four right.
All right, Brian, your breakdown with this one.
I remember saying, I think in round 17 or round 18, I think I said, Jesus, the Tigers are going to win again, aren't they? Because they looked like they were going to at that late in the season. And, even with the qualifying final loss, it's hard to back away with them. I would love to see Geelong win. I mean, it would be great to see Gary Ablett Jr., who arguably is probably the best player in the last 20 years. You could make the argument for a lot of other guys, but I think in terms of impact of the game, in terms of his overall skill, having gone to the Gold Coast, and he came back and, helped lead this team again with the veterans that they have and the young guys. I think Ryan Myers, is going to have a fantastic game. But you look at the Tigers and you look and again, they are here and to see what Damien Hardwick has done with this side. Dustin Martin again continues to be just, again, right now in a sense, it is almost with seeing Gary Ablett and then and Dustin, it is kind of symbolic, and maybe the little master has one more to show Dusty before he moves on, or maybe Dusty and company does it. I think it is very difficult to go against the Tigers here, just because I think that they are in form. We've seen them win that scrappy game against Port Adelaide. We've seen them overcome, a St Kilda side that did have a little bit of momentum, even if they were being outplayed. I think, but this is also the same team that lost to the Lions. So there's that. I think there's a lot of experience. You've got a lot of guys on this team who are playing in their third grand final. And there's a lot of guys on Geelong's that are, they're also playing in their third grand final, but it's been a few years. In some cases, it's their fourth. But I think that this is going to be I think Richmond's going to win. I think it's going to be a very difficult game, and I think it's going to end up being tough conditions. Everybody talks about how wet the grass is going to be.
It's that dewy grass.
That dewy grass. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I would be surprised if a team gets out of the 50s. I think it's going to end up being probably about the same as that Port game. We might end up only seeing a dozen goals between the two teams. It's very possible we might see, and I'd have to look it up, but I'm not going to because of time. But 1960 is the lowest scoring grand final. I think Collingwood only scored 14 points in that grand final. I hate to say it, but I wouldn't be surprised, especially with the shorter quarters, if that is threatened. But I'm going to stick with Richmond.
And now that was your original pick as well. Now, gentlemen, and anyone that listens to the show, you know that I am the man with the hot takes. I mean, I even have my own damn segment on my NFL recap shows with the habanero headlines right there. And then, of course, if you do listen to other ones, really appreciate that. But if you just listen to football ones and DOS Round football ones, no big deal. We still love you the same. But
do we though?
Yes. Yeah. No, we're not alienating anyone here. No,
yeah. Oh, I understand. Go ahead.
Just love us.
Yes, of course.
You're messing with the business, Brian. Damn it. But I'm going to stick. I'm going to hold with my guns. Before the finals, I said that Geelong was going to beat the Richmond Tigers in the grand final, and I am still going to stick with that. I still love my boy Hawkins. I still love my boy Dangerfield with that. One of the best mustaches I've ever seen. And you say greedy game. I'm probably thinking, alluding to your poll, I'm probably thinking a lot more with my heart than my head, but that's per usual with me. So I'm just being consistent here. I am going to go with Geelong. I'm going to go with them winning a 1-goal game, but if they could just be accurate, which I do believe they will be accurate, and they're going to be kicking goals from around the 40 to the 50. I think they're going to be able to nail those and not even get into those close, greedy plays with Richmond. If they could stay away from that and avoid that game, they will have success. Geelong is winning the 2020 grand final.
Hey Ross,
yes?
I hate to add it to you. Listening to a few of the podcasts, the last weather forecast that I heard has the potential for thunderstorms that day in Brisbane.
Doesn't matter. We all know when it comes to those weatherman, always wrong, and I got my fingers crossed, but I got sick from my guns. It's a dignity thing. I have a thing
against weather people because it's usually the ones that come on and interrupt Jeopardy for me, and they go, "Well, this is very important." Yeah, get off my TV. You get paid $500,000.
They interrupt Jeopardy.
You get paid $500,000 to read off a teleprompter.
Tornadoes say me here in Iowa. I can't exactly watch Jeopardy if I got a tornado coming down on me. So I kind of understand in some situations.
Just as long as I have Jeopardy recorded, I think we're all good. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for us for our grand finals preview show. Thank you so much for sticking to us to the end. And just to wrap things up, here's our plugs. To follow Twitter, everything will be linked, of course, but the USAFL 1997, they're on Twitter, they're on Instagram, they're on Facebook. Just the website again, Brian,
is usafl.com.
That's the one. Super easy. How can you not remember that? Another great website that you should go to, maybe before or after, the kind of way you're feeling, www.thefourthandlong.com. And we can check out everything there. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, YouTube, anywhere there's a podcast. Really good chance we are there. And let me plug the merch as well, because we're going to footy, and we've had this, the tweet that got me into this amazing sport and to meet you two lovely gentlemen was that footy is the most underrated sport in the world. And with that, the Footy is Underrated t-shirt was born. Very nice tri-blend. It's actually, I'm not even trying to sell at this point. It's one of my comfiest t-shirts right now, and I love wearing it just because it's great. So you can go to our website, go to apparel, and check that one out. And then I know you guys are going to be up 3:30 in the morning. Brian's the lucky one, right? You're up at 4:30.
First bounce is 4:30 a.m.
Oh, you lucky bastard over there on the East Coast. I'm here at Mountain Time. nice and early 2:30, the time where it's too late to stay up, too early to really wake up. So
It's usually 12:30. I'm usually going to bed on grand final day at
Oh,
3:30.
Yeah, it's usually 11:35 my time, so it's usually there for a while for the grand final party. I just stay up because there's no, I really had no chance to nap. It's like now I'm like I at least can somewhat get a nap in with it being 3:30 with me here in the Central Time Zone. So I'm kind of in between you two. It's like I'm just
Oh,
close
man.
enough to breakfast.
And my
time.
kid's sleeping through the night now, so it's not like I can poke her or anything. Yeah.
Even better. Isn't
Yeah.
that just the best? But that's going to wrap it for us. Ladies and gentlemen, whether you're going to be at the game, which if you're listening, very cool. Thank you very much. If you're going
Send
to be
pictures. Send pictures.
right,
Yes.
right. If you're going to be able to watch it without having to wake up at a ridiculous time, or if you're like us, you're going to watch it whether you have your parties or if you're just going to be at your home, try not to wake everyone up in your house or apartment, which I'm at. Well, good luck to you all. But thank you so much for listening. Check us out everywhere, and we will catch you guys after the grand finals. Enjoy that one.